There is nothing more important that a leader can do than to be present in a conversation. Mindfulness isn't about being soft. It's a very strategic motion. It's about being intentional, and it's about leaders being very aware of their impact.
On this episode of Executive Edge, Simon sits down with Cece Morken, Fortune 500 board director and former CEO of Headspace.
Cece shares what it really takes to serve on top boards and why being present might be the most underrated executive skill of all.
My very first question back to people is, what would your intention be? And if their intention is an opportunity for me to grow and give back, then I say, then let's talk about some of the benefits that accrue from that. For me, there's three with all good intent. We are diminishing the contributions of others. When we are aware of our shadows and then we're explicit about our shadows, it is empowering to the rest of the team, gives them the sense that I too can be like that, and it's okay to say I'm aware of the things I need to work on.
Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting recording of Executive Edge, the old Experts Uncut. Super excited today. It is a Friday, we're doing this recording, so the end of the week, to have with me Cece Morken. Cece, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to see you.
Excited to be with you today.
Let me give some background. Cece Morken is a Fortune 500 and public board director, and not one, not two, but three companies, Wells Fargo, Genpact, and DailyPay. Cece is also the former CEO of a mental wellness technology company that many people will have heard of called Headspace, and also prior to that, a long time Intuit executive. So ton of very senior experience and senior executive exposure. So fascinated to kind of dive in and learn a bit more about you, Cece. So thank you again.
Of course.
So being able to have conversations with someone who's had the broad experience as a C-level executive, but also a board member across relatively different styles of company. When you chat with other C-level executives, perhaps ones who haven't had board positions in the past, but they're considering it. What's your general typical reaction? Do you say, why not? It gives you broad experience. It's worth doing. It's a great networking opportunity. And how would they even get started? Are there headhunters that go out searching for board members, or is it somewhat random? What's your general advice?
The question is so relevant because I get asked this all the time. And so my very first question back to people is, well, what would your intention be? And if their intention is, it's an opportunity for me to grow and give back, then I say, then let's talk about some of the benefits that accrue from that. And, for me, I think there's three that at least I've experienced being on a board while being an operator, which I think is the root of the question. Mm-hmm. I think it gives you a broader strategic exposure. And I don't just mean for strategy, I mean it for really anything that you're working on, whether it's thinking about AI, whether it's thinking about ERM, whether it's thinking about talent. You're in a room with people that you don't see every day. And typically, it is a business that's not yours, so they have a different set of challenges. And so you just get this great exposure to thinking differently, very strategically. The second thing I think it does is gives you a better understanding of governance. Mm-hmm. And when you're an operator and you have a little better understanding of governance, like what do the boards and the board committees think about and focus on? Even at an executive level, you are in some of those committee meetings, but not all of them. So it gives you just a better understanding of governance, which I think makes you a better leader. But maybe most importantly, you learn the art of the question, because as a board member, you're not solving problems. You're not doing the work. Your job is to ask questions that help others come to better decisions or to educate you. So if you think about that tension between inquiry and advocacy, mm-hmm. this is all about inquiry.
Yeah, I love that. And is there, so let's kind of set the stage as well. I mean, the level of time, if you're a
Mm,
board member and you're retired or semi-retired versus, versus leading a scaling technology organization, your bandwidth potentially, I mean, I'm making an assumption
yeah.
bandwidth could be a little different, but what's the go-in prep work as well, right? So is it just turning up and reacting to questions, or setting the scene and setting questions and trying to add value dependent on the other feedback, and whatever the topics are at the top of the agenda, or you get this brief ahead of time, and then you have a specific role, right, is to probe in these certain areas as a balance against the other board members. I mean, what's the dynamics there?
You know, I actually think it's changed over the years. And
Interesting. Okay.
so anybody who thinks that it is just showing up and not that much of an investment, or that it's dull
Yeah.
and that you're just doing governance, it's changed dramatically. And I will draw a distinction between, I think it is different on public versus private boards,
Hmm.
but generally this is what happens. You get pre-read materials, and so your job is to make sure that you've read through all of that, and it's a lot to
Hmm.
read through. Excuse me. So you read through that. In some cases, the boards will have you submit your questions on the pre-read in advance. And that way they're prepared for what's on your mind. And other ones, they're just going to it's all just a discussion when you get there. But beyond even doing the pre-reads, and keep in mind the pre-read is both for the core board meeting plus whatever committees you're on. And so let me come back
Right.
to, how should you think about time management? But you're going to have a pre-meeting, and you're going to or a pre-read, and you're going to have a meeting for the board and any of these committees. Some of the committees meet more often than others. So if you're on the audit committee, you're going to meet, gosh, I would say at least 8 times a year. And in some cases, it might be almost every month, because you
Wow.
have regular audit meetings, but then you have to have a meeting before any earnings release takes place,
Hmm.
or the filing of a 10K or a 10Q. So all of those things come into play. If you're an operator, um, I think, first of all, I think only one board is what you could handle and be really good with it.
Okay.
And then you want to think about how many committees you could be on. And I would say it's probably one.
Okay.
As you get more used to it, you might be able to do more, but you don't want to overextend. Now, because beyond just the prep work for the individual board that you're on, you should stay in tune with things that come out from some of the publications. Like, I'll just use NACD or corporate boards, things that come out from the auditors. You need to read and stay current on all of that. So it's a pretty good time investment. And I mentioned this, if it is a private company, in my experience, it tends to be even deeper, because a private company, and of course it depends on the scale they're at, but let's say it's a private company that's planning to go IPO at some point, so it's sub a billion at this
Hmm.
point. They're still probably building some of their capabilities around governance, and even operational excellence. So your involvement is tending to be more, because you're doing a lot of coaching to the exec team.
Interesting. Super, super interesting. And I mean, with that time commitment, did you ever have conflicts, right, that kind of came up with other roles? I mean, just even managing a monthly meeting as a senior exec, let alone doing it across, two senior executive roles for different companies. I mean, that sounds,
Of course you do.
yeah, of
So
course.
what most boards will do is, in fact, even in the recruitment process,
Okay.
you'll get the agenda, and you usually, if they're good, they've got an agenda for at least 18 months to 2 years.
Oh,
So
wow.
you will check that agenda to see if it's got conflicts. And if you have conflicts, you need to let them know about it, and it can disqualify you, because you're required to show up X% of the time in order to be
Yeah.
considered for reelection. So,
Okay.
so yes, you need to look at that. But the other thing, and I learned this from someone else, that's an important question to ask that I did not think of right away, is where is this located? because you
Yeah.
have to think about the travel to get there. Because if it's 2 plane trips to get somewhere, well, that's 2 days on either side of the meeting that you've lost. So, as tactical as it sounds, location matters.
Yeah, that's huge. I was interestingly, I was talking to a couple of VCs, very separate conversations out in the Bay Area, and this was probably over a decade ago, and asking them for their insight into, what do they think was the momentum and the dynamics, right? And that, there's a huge history behind the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. And one thing that always stuck with me is that VCs, consciously or unconsciously, will put a slightly higher weighting on being able to go and attend meetings with execs in their investments,
Oh,
if
interesting.
it's a drive away, right? So there is a huge
Interesting.
advantage, in just in general fundraising. So that co-location thing, I mean, it's an important consideration for sure in board positions, but I think investors as well take that into mind. What about then the recruitment side? I mean, everyone is extremely busy, right? You're getting contacted by recruitment agents trying to poach you for other leading organizations and other roles, etc. How do they get through to someone, and how do you even let them know? Are there certain agencies in different industries that focus on board recruitment?
Yeah, and Simon, if you don't mind, I want to add one other thing that I think is
Oh,
important in
sure.
board consideration, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
of course. Yeah, please.
And that's the mission.
Okay.
So when you're thinking about joining a board, I think it's important that you have passion around the mission of the company. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to just join a board because you were asked to and you had it on your checklist,
Of
but
course.
do
Yeah.
you really believe in the purpose that they are in what they're delivering? Do you believe in their values? Have you want to meet the CEO, you want to meet the chair, any of the committees you're going to be on, you want to meet the chairs of those committees and make sure that, again, values and chemistry is there, because you're going to invest a fair amount of time and you want to have passion around it. And you can go through that process and then say no. I
Mm-hmm.
said no to one just a couple of weeks ago,
Oh,
and
interesting.
that's part of the whole purpose of the interview and vetting process. So
Yeah.
it's perfectly acceptable, just like if you were interviewing for a career change. So the way the process works, I think it's a great idea to, let's suppose you're in the C-suite, but you're not the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Let the CEO know that you're interested in a board seat because they can be super helpful for you, especially public company CEOs because they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And they have great relationships usually with the headhunters that do this work. So I would let the CEO know. That's how I got on my first board. Brad Smith was the CEO of Intuit, and so he helped me with that. I work a lot with the headhunters for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's who I go to when we're recruiting new board members because I'm on NomGov for several of them. And they have a great practice around that, just like they have a practice for a CTO or a CEO. They have a practice for board seats. Most companies do go through those companies to secure board seats if they're, of a good size. Smaller companies may just do referrals. Having said that, I think the referral network is very big. So when we're discussing the needs for a new board member, we go through and say, what are the capabilities? We have a checklist
Mm-hmm.
that says, what are the capabilities we think are important? What are the board members that are already here? Which ones do they possess? And what are we thinking about for the future where there might be gaps? And that goes into what we're recruiting for. And then we first ask board members, does anyone know someone who might be good here? Now, we will try not to get people from the same companies because then you
Mm-hmm.
start to get groupthink and we don't want that. But you still have come in contact with people that you have a lot of respect for, or you interviewed for a previous board seat that you think would be a good fit. So, getting your name out there is important. I get asked a lot, will you introduce me to the headhunters? And I always do it.
Yeah, it's great. Almost, I mean, the kind of sports related analogy, or the only one that I can think of in this, I don't know whether this will hit home, but just in picking a national team, right? I mean, I know in the UK, for example, picking the England national sports team, right? You have to go out and source those individual positions that you think will play well together,
Interesting.
and they're already working full time, in certain clubs around the country, right? And they're not going to get time to train a lot together, but they've got to be able to perform, and that's a difficult selection process in itself. I think that I can see the balance of the personalities, but the experience they bring
Yeah.
based on their role, but also the alignment with values is not that straightforward. I can imagine it's quite a complex process, but super super interesting. Um, and the other thing I wanted to cover with you, and I know that you would um, have a perspective on this, not just naturally based on who you are and the energy that I've seen you bring, but also your position with the wellness company, Headspace
Mm.
specifically. I've seen a lot more openness, a lot more executives kind of embrace the importance of the concept of mindfulness, individually, in order to be successful in their roles, be it board positions, be it senior executive positions. And I think you're in a pretty unique position that you are driving that concept out to the marketplace through a technology role, but also holding those positions in larger organizations, specifically within financial services. So, what are your thoughts there? How important has that been to you? Is it to you now, as well as has it been in your career?
So, my experience at Headspace really elevated my perspective on the importance of mindfulness in leadership. So,
Okay.
it's not just about personal well-being. It really does make, I believe, for more effective leadership. And one of there's lots of ways that happens, which we can talk about, but one of the key ways that it happens is it helps to balance that mechanism between stimulus and response, which I
Okay.
think helps us with much better decision making.
And do you still follow certain practices yourself as well? I think the one thing that I found that was great around, I mean, I'll put out a plug for Headspace, but other apps as well, like Calm, was the fact that there was a structure to it. There was a place to go. There was options that and you could carry it around in your pocket and follow the guidance that some of the coaches and the mindfulness recordings would give you. That, to me, that structure increased my usage, that's for sure. And I've personally gone down a complete rabbit hole the last 2 years studying mainly European, kind of German, Austrian psychologists and psychoanalysts like Carl Jung and Alfred Adler, and a little bit in Sigmund Freud, but less so because I'd already studied him in the past. And it's I'll be honest, it's completely changed me, and I just love the growing trend of technology companies getting involved
Mm.
in this space, but also just the openness and awareness and general sharing that executives are having with other execs as well as with their team members about how this is critical. I mean, I'll be honest, it wasn't like that 20 years ago. I've seen a
No.
big shift in the last decade, and more people embracing it. But is that so? That's changed you, do you think, and what you bring to the table on the board positions, but also just generally personally?
Oh, without a doubt. And I always like to point out that mindfulness isn't about being soft. It's a very strategic motion. And to your point, I think the structure is what helps us to build habits, right?
Hmm.
It's just like even if your workout routine, you do something that's very structured and it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
And it's not that you don't need the structure, it's always there to go back to, but it also starts to be something that you just incorporate to your daily life. And for me, there's a couple components that make this really, really important. And I'll give a couple examples if that's helpful
Yeah.
of how
Sure.
this starts to show up even in the workplace. But to me, mindfulness is all about being present. It's about being intentional. And it's about leaders being very aware of their impact,
Mm-hmm.
which might relate to some of the rabbit holes you've been going down, that you just mentioned. But if you think about, let me unpack each of these a little bit. If you think about being present, there is nothing more important that a leader can do than to be present in a conversation. So if it's a one-on-one, if it's a meeting, being present, shows the other person that they're important. It ensures that the topic at hand gets your full attention. And if you think about what happens in a day, so we're in an office, it's back to back with meetings, and people go from one meeting to the next meeting with no time for context switching. And so you're still thinking about what just happened, or you're thinking about your next meeting, and it's very difficult to be productive in that manner. And so one of the things we did at Headspace, which I have carried forward,
Mm-hmm.
is first of all, we don't allow meetings to be scheduled on the half hour or the hour. We schedule them on the 20-minute increments. So it
Oh,
either
that's great.
ends at
Yeah.
10 minutes before it's supposed to, which is the traditional method. And then we take, and this is my point about once it's a habit, we take 3 minutes to do a breathing mindfulness exercise. And again, this is not to be soft. This is
Mm-hmm.
to let us get rid of what we just did. And then the mindfulness breathing will focus a little bit on the topic we're about to go into, but it's a little bit of talking about, okay, you all just left something. Let's take some breaths to let that go. You may have some follow-up items, note them, but put them to the side. We're about to start talking about our talent of the future. We're going to be going through it in this manner. So let's get ourselves cleansed, take some breaths so that we can be prepared to be fully present in this next discussion. It's so effective. And that's
Yeah.
all it takes, is just a few minutes. I did not used to do that. So I would show up into a meeting, and probably the first 10 minutes, I'm not there.
Yep.
I'm still thinking about what just happened. Maybe I'm frustrated, whatever it is. This whole thing allows you to let go of all of that. Even if I don't like how that last meeting ended, well, then take some breaths, note it. You can come back to it. It's just super helpful. The same with you're going to go give a presentation, in front of, it's Investor Day.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about what you see behind the stage, usually you see a bunch of presenters holding their papers, looking at them, trying to remember everything they're going to say. They're rehearsing. If instead they took the time to be present and think about, what's the audience going to be like? What does the audience want from me? How can I best move about the stage and connect with the people out there? It gets you out of your head and what you're going to say, and it gets you thinking more about the people who came to see you.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like being present helps with all of that. Let me pause there before I go on. Does that make
No,
sense
I
to
mean,
you?
yeah, it's fantastic. Straight after this call and for next week and going forward, everything is going to be 20, 25 minutes versus 30. I mean, I think I've attempted that in the past, and I've got lazy with it to try and cram in as many meetings as possible. And I almost lost probably never really truly appreciated the reason for, or the benefit, the power, and then the intent. Because otherwise we do it just because we don't want to be late for the next meeting. But,
Or meetings run over, and
yeah.
somebody says, and now I say to people, no,
Mm-hmm.
this was scheduled for this amount of time.
Yeah.
I got to go.
Yeah. And that sets a standard as well that I think people begin to appreciate and then respect going forward. I mean, there's so many hidden layers in communication that often are overlooked and sometimes forgotten about because you don't talk about them. Is that everyone in the room walks away with a different impression that's different from yours after a meeting. You might think it went well. There could be a couple of people in the room that thought it went well as well, and another two that didn't. But if you're not mindful enough, or you feel not mindful of their perspective and kind of empathetic to how they leave that session, then no doubt it's unlikely to get the message across, or it won't be as successful as you wanted, right? So it's there's a benefit to it for you as an individual, but then as a leader, I can see there's huge upside, short, medium, as well as long term, right? If that builds rapport, so that's fantastic. Um,
You know, that's a really interesting way to think about ending a meeting too. And um, one of the areas that I think mindfulness helps with, which I mentioned intention and being aware of your impact.
mm,
And I don't know if are you familiar with growth, Carol Dweck and growth mindset? I'm
yes,
assuming,
yeah, no, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely love her book. Yeah,
Yes, I love it too, which is basically assuming all of us have an opportunity to be at our best, and it's our job to help that happen.
yeah,
And I think about two things from a leadership standpoint related to mindfulness. One is being aware of our impact. And, as leaders, our job is not to have all the answers. I mentioned this in the board part too, but it is to help let others come up with the answers because we pull out the greatness that's already inside of them.
hmm,
And, again, Carol Dweck is great at that, but so is Liz Wiseman, who does some work on multipliers,
interesting.
which is,
Okay,
again, how do we multiply the capabilities that are in the people that we lead? And she also calls out something called accidental diminisher tendencies, which are, with all good intent, we are diminishing the contributions of others. And so the way I would tie this together is when we are aware, and this might go with the Carl Jung work that you mentioned, of our shadows,
hmm,
and then we're explicit about our shadows, and tell people that this is a gap I have, but I'm working on it, and we invite others to give us feedback, it can be a great way to end a meeting by saying, "You all know I'm working on my responses and how fast I respond, and whether I just wait for the rest of the room to weigh in before I do. How did I do,
yeah,
and how can I do better?" It is so empowering to the rest of the team when they see that you're that vulnerable, and it gives them the sense that I too can be like that, and I can ask for help and I can ask for coaching, and it's okay to say I'm aware of the things I need to work on.
yeah. I love that. You can't fake authenticity, I think, right? I think sometimes you may want to, there are benefits in doing it, but it's the harder route to take, but ultimately the one that that generates the best outcome for you and the team and what you want them to do, right? I think that's super critical. I love that. So what's next for Cece? Are you continuing? I mean, you said semi-retired. Are you intending on more board positions? Are you purely on the investor route? Anything in the near term? Writing a book,
Well,
maybe. I think you'd be amazing.
so I had not considered that. That's interesting. I've only been retired for 2 years, so I'm still adjusting to it. But um, I mentioned it's not that I'm opposed to another board. I'm just very specific that it meets the criteria I mentioned before. Like I have to have
Yeah,
passion for the mission.
yeah.
I'm aware of things like context switching now because I am on three.
Hmm.
But what I didn't mention is I'm also on one nonprofit board officially, but I advise and work with several others, all
Awesome.
focused on youth mental health.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit of a pitch I'm doing, but
Yeah, no, that's great.
our family has been involved in youth mental health for decades now. And it's something we have a lot of passion for. And some of the advances that are being made now are really impressive. But a lot of our focus is for underserved neighborhoods and underserved schools.
Okay.
And so I'm not probably, but I am increasingly spending more and more time in that area.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's fantastic. Okay, well, I will do some research into the nonprofits you're connected to and learn a bit more about them. Is it specifically out in California or in Texas or kind of broader?
So the one that I'm officially on the board on is called Marshmallow Minds, and it is in San Jose School District.
Okay.
We teach STEAM from through grade school, through junior high, or through high school,
Okay.
to Title I schools.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, it's the right time to have such an important impact at that age as well. I think, a lot of prior generations of hidden struggles and, never had the opportunity to resolve them. So, for us to acknowledge them potentially early on, and they would have been caught and try to help course correct where you can, right, or at least provide the
Right.
support they otherwise wouldn't have had access to. I think is fantastic. So yeah, that's great. All right, well, thank you again. Like I said, the recording is on a Friday, so I really appreciate your time at the end of the week. It was good to chat with you, Cece, and so thank you again.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, Simon. Take care.